Hello, this is Tom, aka Jetty. I'm here for Tabletop Tap Room, and today we have an interview with Jim Wampler, legendary creator of Marvin the Mage and Mutant Crawl Classics. But before we get to that, let me just have a quick word from our sponsor to pay the bills, and that is Gloomer Games. Their Kickstarter has just funded, and after 84 hours, I think it was. So thank you to my listeners who participated in that. But let's get a word from Professor Dungeon Master on Gloomer Games' Kickstarter.
You by Gloomer Games Mystic Days, the Caldwell Edition. The Kickstarter includes 4 hardbound books, Monsters and Mayhem, Magic and Treasure, Player's Book, and Adventure Guide. OSR style, 6 classic stats, no character classes, you build the character you want, no initiative to slow things down, no OP characters, and death is always on the table. You roll to cast, failure could lead to an explosive catastrophe, and every weapon is unique. Polearms get the place they deserve with every weapon having a reach modifier, and monsters are bestial and not humanized. With fantastic cover art by Clyde Caldwell, this is old school gaming the way you remember. Links below.
Okay, so that is
Clyde Caldwell cover art. Damn.
Yes. The guys at Gloomer Games have licensed 5 of his classic covers, and they've been very generous with him. They actually put a clause in the contract called the Jeff Easley clause, which states that they will in no way Photoshop out or crop out his signature. And Clive was greatly amused by that. So I love Gloomer Games and how they're treating their artists very, very much. But we're not here to talk about Gloomer Games other than just the ad. We're here to talk about, to interview you. This is Jim Wampler. Jim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. We know each other a little bit for a while, but I look forward to getting to know you more.
Yes. Hey, I appreciate that. And I've had your friend Tim Cast on the show. He's a great interview. And then we talked for, I don't know, an hour after the 2-hour interview.
I've sat on Tim's back porch with your buddy Don Zamora, who I'm also getting to know.
So you came to fame with a comic strip. You are the creator of Marvin the Mage. And I actually prepped I've got some covers here I can pull up, but why don't you start by telling us how Marvin the Mage came about? How did you get your start in comics?
Marvin the Mage can be a cautionary tale because I created him when I was 18 years old and started playing Dungeons and Dragons. The cautionary tale is be careful when you do that because you may end up looking like your own cartoon character eventually. But yeah, it was just silly cartoons I was doing when we learned to play D&D, and there is a single Marvin the Mage single panel appearance in an issue of Adventure Gaming magazine. I want to say number 13, way back in the day when we were driving to Cincinnati and just walking into Tim Cask's office and saying, please publish our stuff. Then subsequently was a webcomic. One of my re-entries as we go in and out of the hobby was bring that character back as a webcomic. And for a while, Marvin was published in the Gary Con event guide every year when I had the time to do that. Oh, and you can buy the comics on the web store if you're so inclined.
Yes, there will be links in the show notes for your web store and for Drive-Thru. I saw that you had some other publications on Drive-Thru, but so here is some of the Marvin the Mage comics. I guess there is a little bit of a resemblance to you there.
I can do the cosplay. I've got the wand and the red hat and the red robes somewhere.
And the outfit, yeah. The closest I ever came to doing cosplay was America's Civil War reenacting. I got during the 90s. I got so enamored in that. I almost pulled the trigger on buying a black powder rifle and all that, but I suppose maybe it's good that I didn't.
But yeah, I mean, you've already made it sound like 100 times a bigger deal than it was. But back in the day, in Judges Guild, Pegasus Magazine, and some writing and art in Tim's Adventure Gaming Magazine were my earliest publication credits.
Yeah.
You can go to some of those old Judges Guild Pegasus magazines, 4 or 5, and find some what I regard today as highly embarrassing art by me.
Yeah. So this was my wife commenting on cosplay compared to reenactment. Wow. Well, it's kind of similar. You're wearing a costume.
I'm absolutely not a cosplayer because usually the conventions are too hot for that stuff for me. But I love Halloween. Halloween's my favorite holiday of the year, so I usually go all out.
Yeah, I think if there was one thing I really wanted to have, it would be a stormtrooper outfit, and I would wear it for Halloween. It's just that would be the thing I would do. But now, the last time Marvin the Mage,
also a great character.
Yeah,
you make me very angry, Earth creature.
I grew up on him. Last time that he was in publication was in the Gygax magazine.
Only issue number 1, and I'm tempted to tell why there weren't subsequent appearances. But yeah, issue 1 and 2 of Gygax magazine, I was the art director for TSR number 2. Jason Elliott, now Solarian Games, and Marvin was in the first issue next to Phil Foglio, bringing back What's New with Phil and Dixie, which was, you can imagine what an honor I felt that was.
Yeah.
Just to be on the page next to somebody I freaking love.
Right out of Dragon magazine from the early days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now you went straight from comics to games development. So what happened there? How did you get into game development?
I don't know, something like, I did the things that other people do, like I've been married. I didn't have kids, but I've been married. I've had various careers in tech startup and web development. And, as those little life things go back and forth, at one point, my brother and I had a technology startup and we're making good bank and had, walking around with stupid money. So around 2005, Jim Ward was looking for some angel investors to come in and publish Metamorphosis Alpha 4th edition. And at the same time, I was talking to Kenzer and Company, and we came this close to a deal where I was going to write Space Hack and get my I want to design a game ambitions accomplished. And we just fell out over dumb stuff like rights and royalties, and it didn't happen. But it was still until the day he died, I was friends with Steve Johansson. I knew Steve before I became big buddies with Jolly. So we did that. We made the first version of Mud Puppy Games, and in 2006 we published this sci-fi miniatures game I did called Galacta 3 and the 4th edition of Metamorphosis Alpha, and lost our pants. Never even paid the printing bill because I was, that was just a point where I had some hard lessons to learn, but they're valuable ones. I can order a book from Regent in Hong Kong and get it across the ocean and in stores and not lose my ass now if I need to.
Right. So there is a learning curve to publishing in the OSR RPG space.
Yeah, I mean, I can give basic strategy advice to anybody. None of us come out of the chute knowing how to do any of this. And if you have ambitions to do it in small bites. Don't jump in head first like I tend to do. And then just go find the people in the industry that are already successfully doing what you want to do and just call them up and say, how did you do that? Because the vast majority of creators, I mean, our industry, what are we? The fair-headed stepchild of the niche end of a dying industry, print game publication. Everybody's happy to share tips and tricks. The Independent Publishers Union that I'm now a part of is just a bunch of us that were all friends anyway, doing that exact thing. Here's a good printer to use. Stay away from these guys. Here's a hot artist. He needs work. Go check him out, kind of stuff. And people will tell you how they did it. And alternatively, you can just pay very close attention.
Watch what other people are doing that works and copy that.
Yeah, track a bunch of Kickstarters.
Yeah. And
don't get over ambitious, which is one of my frequent sins too.
Yeah, I've been known to jump headfirst into deep water without knowing how deep it was. But yeah, and what you said there, get a mentor. it took me a long time to really realize the value of a mentor. And I'm so glad that I found mentors in the YouTube space before I, really got into it. And they were gracious enough to let me pick their brains. So, yeah.
Mentors and another thing that is very it's two crucial steps are allow yourself to be mentored first of all before you go find one. Listen to what they say and follow it. But I also find it very useful to have something I call consigliaries, because I just can't think of a better term, but a couple of vetted business type people. Because if you're a creator first, now you're going to self-publish, now you're in the zone where you've got to wear different hats and keep track of which hat you have on when. And you can learn all that. It's much easier to teach a creator to be a business person than it is to teach a business person to be creative. But I've got a couple of guys. One of them is my brother, who I partnered with in that tech startup, and now in a completely different company. I actually work for him part-time because he's the business cat. And another industry person that I won't call out publicly. And I just essentially hand them these big ball bats and say, okay, when I need it, pop me with these. Because as a creator, I wake up every morning with 15 fantastic ideas, and sometimes I need to be talked down out of those trees.
Yeah.
I've figured it out. I've been to China. I've talked to the guys in China. I can do a Kickstarter for glow in the dark polyhedral dice. Well, should you just focus on the thing that's making you money right now?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That sounds like my wife, actually.
Well, ideally, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Just a sort of partner agreement that I'm going to give you permission to tell me when I'm wrong, and then I'm going to throw the breaker panels in my head and listen to you.
That is probably the best advice I've heard. So you got into Metamorphosis Alpha, and then you went to Goodman Games to produce their Mutant Crawl Classics. So it sounds like your niche that you're really interested in is post-apocalyptic.
Well, yeah, you like everybody's favorite Doctor Who will tend to be the first one they saw because you imprint on that, right? So at a very early age, freshman in college, I imprinted on AD&D and Gamma World, and to an extent later Champions. So yeah, I'm all about the post-apocalypse, because it's a really good genre match for medieval fantasy or traditional D&D. You're doing the same thing. So the mechanics all just mirror. You're a bunch of murder hobos out killing the bad guys and taking their stuff, right? Exploring underground ruins. It's all the same. Whereas other sci-fi genres, and especially licensed things, like you start doing a Star Trek the role-playing game or a Doctor Who role-playing game, and now you start running into problems because the structure of the genre is slightly different. Yeah. You're not just a group of guys, people, hoodlums, whatever, out there exploring the world. Who's going to be the captain on the bridge? And how do you do a landing party? Or who gets to play the Time Lord kind of things? I think the popularity of all the various Star Wars RPGs is directly attributable to, again, how closely it just matches D&D, because for whatever reason, that just works.
Yeah, Star Wars is kind of fantasy in space.
Yeah, you're just a bunch of... I personally prefer Traveler myself, but you have to work harder in Traveler to get in the spot where you're just a gang of people. You've got your own ship. Now let's go explore and rob people or whatever.
Yeah. So
I'm very married to just guts and glory old school gaming as a play style preference.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's fascinating. So you worked with Goodman Games, and it looked like you were the primary writer of almost all of their Mutant Crawl Classic stuff. You were essentially like a brand manager, maybe?
I ran the product line from the beginning, but it wasn't exactly what happened. Is back in 1979 when I stumbled across D&D, we went crazy and started evangelizing it. And I grew up in a little rural town, Frankfort, Kentucky. It grinds my gears that D&D was out when I was in high school, and we just didn't know about it. We went to, I met Luzacci at a science fiction convention in Louisville, Kentucky, and bought Starfleet Battles from him when I know good and well the white box was sitting in his booth too, and I just didn't know what that was. So
Oh, Jim.
when I stumbled across it as a freshman in college, that Christmas, my brother got the Holmes Basic set for his Christmas present for me. Then he took it back to Franklin County High School, and it started there. And a year later, we've now talked somebody's grandma or aunt that runs a yarn shop downtown to start selling Dragon Magazine, TSR books, Grenadier miniatures. You know, that level of being so thrilled with something, you want to go evangelize it. I thought was a one-time event, like I was saying before, because I just imprinted on it. But when Joseph Goodman and Goodman Games came out with Dungeon Crawl Classics, I got that feeling again. So immediately, me and, I wasn't the only one. A bunch of people. Reed St. Filippo started doing Crawling on a Broken Moon fanzines. I remember in the old Google Plus days, there was a whole Gamma World Crawl Classics group that were working on stuff. And I just took my version to Joseph and managed to sell it to him. But before that, I was pitching stuff all the time. I mean, there are old North Texas cons where Zach Glazer and I would just be sitting outside smoking, and Zach's dreaming of the day he wants to write an adventure and maybe do a box set. And I'm just sitting there going, I just want to write some adventures for DCC. And then I'd wander over and pitch an idea to Harley or Michael Curtis. And it would just be a laundry list of, Mage keep on an island with anti-magic shell, so magic doesn't work. Yeah, we did that in DCC 32, And I waited. I first got my foot in the door when Goodman Games was doing a big coffee table Metamorphosis Alpha reprint. So like the original book, just blown up giant, and then a bunch of articles, and then the Kickstarter stretch goals involved adventures. And I sat and watched the Kickstarter until they got past one stretch goal, then more worth of adventures than I knew they had writers for, and pitched them one and sold it to them. So that was the start of Goodman Games.
Was kind of smart, actually, to be like, I know they don't have a writer for that, and I'll pitch it. So I'm going to leave.
Then later I actually, I was pitching Joe. It was a long process. It was over a year of me, showing up at Gen Cons and showing various versions of playtest rules before he bit. And then we signed a contract, and somewhere in there, I became an actual employee, but it started with just creating and overseeing the entire initial Mutant Crawl Classics product line that was all being published through the Kickstarter. So the core book, a judge's screen, a bunch of modules. I can't write 6 modules, so here's some springboards for other writers to work from, and art directed and laid it all out.
Wow. Now I'm curious because actually I'm pitching to Don Samora all the time, and so some things he's like, yeah, that's a good idea, and some things I could tell right away by his response he's not interested. But so my question to you is rule of thumb. I know you probably didn't keep records, but how would you estimate pitches made to pitches accepted? What would you think that ratio is?
I'm sure that's wildly variable by circumstance and people. I mean, and plus, do you really care? It's just, if you get 0 hits, that's no good.
Yeah.
But
well,
I've got a BFA in painting, and there was a point where, when I had a studio and I'm doing fine art paintings, I realized I was only happy with every 3rd painting. So I just accepted that that's going to be 2 paintings that don't satisfy me. I got to just do and get out of the way to get to the good one. Who cares?
That's an interesting way of looking at that too. Wow. So
I can tell you more about what makes a good pitch if somebody wants to do that.
Let's do that. What makes a good pitch for RPG product?
The ideal pitches. I mean, everybody. I only learned this when I brought my Epic Games back around this last time. I mean, because you can scale it all the way back to you've been through this part. I love role-playing games. I'm going to get in the industry, and then I'll be playing games all the time. And then you get busy and realize it was the opposite. And if you're not careful, you've turned the inspiration faucet off because you're busy making the games.
Mhm.
It's the same thing when you run a company and it only gets worse with scale. Now you're laying out books, you're editing, you're dealing with all your contractors. The last thing you need is 10 pages of pitch. So it should just be an elevator pitch, almost like it's the blurb on the back cover of whatever book it is, a paragraph or two. If you can condense the whole idea down to that, or the whole board game idea down to that, and start with that, and it'll either ring the bell or it won't.
Right.
Then maybe, the more traditional design documents, actual outlines, and
So
hey, we
elevator
play
pitch.
tested this and it works kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Okay. I like that because I'm actually I am an idea guy. I come up with ideas all the time and I throw them against the wall to see what sticks. And I've been throwing a bunch at Don Samora, and not all of them stick. And I don't worry about the ones that don't. I just, hey, are you interested in? So elevator pitch. I'm going to
And
spend
that pitch should contain something that solves a problem that no one else has solved. If you send Michael Curtis, I think, is in charge of the DCC line now. If you send him a pitch and it starts with on a giant ziggurat, or it has innumerable tentacles, or there's a joke we used to pass around of the 10 words never to put in your title of whatever of your adventure, and they're like, I can't rattle it off from memory, but it's like tomb, tome, death, bones. Everything's the tower of this. Try and be a little more creative because it's been for 50 years of these things now.
Yeah. My favorite titles actually involve quotes. So if I have an adventure, I will go looking for quotes. I'm actually writing a sci-fi adventure, and the ship that was used is called the Prodigal Son. Nice. And we recognize that from the Bible, but it's actually S-U-N. But I went back and reread the Prodigal Son from the Bible, and this is an exploration adventure. And I noticed in there it said "Journey into a Far Country," and I was like, "That's my title." That journey, because they're going to scout this star system, or into a far country. So that was but it came out of that. I got to go find a quote that will work for me. Is generally how I do that, but that's because I like literary quotes.
Well, I mean, I love that because I imprinted on the original Star Trek, and they would do that all the time. Here, what is Conscience of the King is the title of the episode. Well, what the hell does that mean? Then you watch and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's from Shakespeare.
Yeah, Hamlet. Yeah.
Picasso said, "Good artists borrow, great artists steal." Go steal things.
Well, my wife doesn't like this, but I call myself an idea whore. I will steal an idea from anybody. I'll take any idea from it, and I'll figure out how to use it. But that's just me. But so
the answer to the original question, after MCC, I wormed my way into being a full-time employee for a while at Goodman Games, and built. I don't know if there's any of my code left, but built their website and did stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Now I know that you've left Goodman Games, a Scientific Barbarian. What's going on with Scientific Barbarian?
Well, Joe did some genius things with DCC, and a lot of what I did with MCC was just don't fix it if it ain't broke, right? So one of the genius moves that Joseph did when DCC first started, from the very beginning, was have an easy licensing deal and encourage third-party content. In a way, MCC came out of that, because I can remember when it was me, James Carpio, and a guy whose name I'm going to say is Scott Taylor, but I might have the name wrong, working on MCC, Tales of the Fallen Empire, and Transylvania Tales. And anyway, what Joseph did with his easy license was just make it possible for all these people at all different levels of both creativity and professionalism to take his stuff and change it around, and not only put it out there, but make some money doing it. And I want to say close to 100% of that stuff is in the Goodman Games store, right? he'll come along and he'll buy, a set of it so he can sell them at conventions and stuff. And that was just pure genius because it has been part of why Dungeon Crawl Classics and some extent Mutant Crawl Classics have had such lengthy legs as games.
Yeah. So
along comes me with Scientific Barbarian. I worked full time for Goodman Games for a couple of years there. Then I left to work for Frog God Games and was partnered there for a while. And then it eventually reached a point where I decided I wanted to bring Mud Puppy Games back because I discovered I'm just happy. My happy spot is doing what I want to do when I want to do it. The entrepreneurial, be your own boss thing.
Right.
And so not being a part of Goodman Games anymore, that was the end of my creative input into Mutant Crawl Classics. And it was, the book is this thick, and there was a page limit that Joseph gave me, or word count limit, that I greatly exceeded to the point where it was like, okay, time to throw the flag. You're done. Let's just get the book out. And there are things that I, as the original creator, want to patch, had planned to patch and add. And the Goodman Games version of doing that is that there's never splat books in these product lines. The content, that kind of content comes to you in the adventures. So this Scientific Barbarian is just me creating content that's intended to be for the post-apocalyptic role-playing genre as a whole, and includes some content from other popular games. But because I'm me, and a lot of my creative team also are MCC fans, it tends to lean that way. Does that make sense?
Right.
The two big things I want to the two mission statements for Scientific Barbarian is, this is the second best setting to role play in on the planet. And it's okay to genre mash because, that's the way Gary Gygax did it. That's the way Joseph Goodman does it. And it's worked out pretty good so far.
Yeah. Well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right. And honestly, that title, Scientific Barbarian, that is a genius title. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm kind of like, man, I should have thought of that.
Thank you. I shouldn't discuss this in public, but I'm going to give you an exclusive. As a title and an idea, and using the trade dress of Scientific America magazine, albeit from 3 decades ago, as humor and satire, that's perfectly legitimate. But then when the first issue hit, and I'm like, okay, there are going to be more issues, I knew I was standing on shaky ground. So ever since the second issue, I've had a completely different logo and cover design in the silo, just in case I get a cease and desist. And instead of that happening, I got a contact from a gentleman who I wasn't friended with, and I looked him up first, and it turns out he's the head graphic designer of Scientific America magazine. And oh, by the way, he's been backing the books. They love it. So I'm good to go.
That's cool. That is a nice feather in your hat. That
it always surprises me, and I don't know why it does, because it shouldn't. Jolly miswired his giant Seaview model and blew up the electronics, and to replace him, he had to cut back in the model. So he just sends a letter to the model company, Moebius, and says, "Can I buy just the parts?" And they're like, "Oh, hey, we're fans tonight's at your table. No, you can't buy the parts. We're just gonna send you a whole box and some new electronics for free here." That's the best, man.
I love people who operate that like that in this industry, that they're just no here, and it's a good way to operate. It just creates more community, creates more positiveness. So Frog God Games, and then you came back to Mud Puppy Games. I'm a little curious, and maybe there's nothing to this. Where did the name Mud Puppy Games come from?
Oh, poor Darlene. I was camping out at her booth at North Texas Con, and she answered that. It's just me being an artist, elemental symbology. My suit in the tarot card deck is wands, which has little salamanders in it. Just me being a fancy BFA boy.
Okay. So, and speaking of Darlene, I wanted to tread lightly when I got here. You've had some interaction with the new TSR new, the Justin Lanassa new TSR folks who.
Oh, we're going there, are we? All right.
Yeah, well, I just thought I'd springboard off the mention of Darlene, because that's been a whole realm of drama when he tried to strong arm her into signing a contract. And I know that you've mentioned to me that a bunch of your artists have come to you with this contract that they got from TSR, and they were like, what's going on with this thing? Should I sign it? And you had a story to tell about that.
I mean, I think everybody who's at least smart and observant understands what's going on there. So I don't need to get into all that. But my personal sole contact to date with Justin Lanassa was when I had no idea who he was, and he just called me up. I'm going to say 2 or 3 years ago, just cold called me, which is fine. I do that to people sometimes just to get a painting cover art I want. I'll cold call an artist, and his pitch was, we're setting up a TSR museum in the old building, and could we persuade you to donate one each of the entire Mutant Crawl Classics line? And I just said, well, let me think about that, and hung up and called Tim Cass 5 minutes later, and I'm like, can you explain to me what Mutant Crawl Classics has to do with TSR? Because I couldn't connect the dots. And it wasn't long after that Tim got the call, for the same thing. Now, in hindsight, we all recognize it was just piling up loot and junk. So that's the only contact I've ever had with Justin. Then much later, after, shenanigans became more public, there was a point where, I would say a year and a half, 2 years ago, I work with a very talented team of writers and artists for Mud Puppy Games, and some of my people were calling me and saying, I just got this contract, I think about working for this guy. And it's not my style to say, don't do that, you should do that. It's more my style to just say, well, let's look at it and talk about it. And so that was a bunch of Zoom calls I had to have where we just walked through the contract, and when we got to the paragraph that's pretty fancy but basically means I now own everything we ever discuss or any ideas you have in the future. I just work these people in my creative team that are all freelancers. I work what that means and the implications, and, kept them from making mistakes. And it was about a year ago that, I'm friends with Darlene. She just called me up, and this is what this guy said. This is what he sent me. This is what he's pressuring me to do. And she wasn't really asking me what to do about it, because Darlene is, slightly older than I am and a seasoned pro. She knew what to do. She just wanted to air it and see what I thought about that, which I completely endorsed her reaction to it, which took, a certain amount of courage, because the evilness involved in all this stuff that's going on is, if you just speak your truth and call bullshit on bullshit, you get targeted. It's happened to Tim, and through my association with Tim, or, I don't ever start it on social media, but sometimes I'm human too. It'll be going on in somebody else's post, and I'll drop a comment thread like, the poor bastard isn't even as smart as Ken Whitman. For God's sakes, that's a low bar. I'll say something like that. So,
Yeah. Well, and sadly with this guy is
what I don't want to do is give any more oxygen to it.
Yeah.
Just let the courts do their thing. Karma will take care of it all in the end. And
yeah. And ultimately this is what's going to happen. It's just that, Don's got a lot of legal fees going on with what he's doing. I know Eric Tenkar got sued by him for libel. There's no there, but it's silenced Eric. So, which was good, which was a good thing, because
the most aggravating thing about it for me, besides the just outright bigotry and misogyny and diagnosable personality disorders of the thing, the most aggravating thing to me is, tabletop games and tabletop role-playing games is a pretty small pool. So, if you've got a guy in there that's just urinating in the pool, for God's sakes, we got to get him out,
That is a great That is a great analogy. Uh,
It's hard enough to make money. Nobody's getting rich doing this. So
we need to get rid of the guy who's urinating in the pool. That I think is the best statement we can say about that. And I'm going to drop it. So
good, because I prefer to talk about cool stuff we're making. And
yeah, well, that is my last question. I always like to wrap up the show with what is Jim Wampler working on now, and what should we expect from him in the future?
Oh, dude, I am so good at marketing online, but I suck in interviews. So thank you for reminding me to do all the plugs. I'm in the middle of delivering the 5th issue of Scientific Barbarian right now, which means the pre-orders are up in the store, and I'll be done shipping backer rewards in a week or two. And the pre-orders that I have now, or any that come in, are the very next thing going out the door. So please go. If it is all interesting to you, go check out what I'm doing. As soon as we get the backers delivered and I get a little organized, the Kickstarter will go up for issue 6. So that's just an ongoing thing. I've got a couple of projects at Mud Puppy that I'm working on in the background, and I can't promise any delivery dates, but one of them will be on with some good coaching from my friend Tom Tullis. I'll be taking a gentle step into 3D printable miniatures that contain a new and original enough idea to distinguish themselves from the hundreds you can go get now. And for 5 years now, I've been writing a superhero RPG, and I'm back on that because I think I finally cracked it. And it's called Mega Heroes. Some people have play tested versions of it in past conventions, but when I get it done, it'll be a non D20 engine, proprietary game engine that I believe solves all the problems implicit in the genre, because I've read them all and played most of them, and that just normal D20 mechanics is not a good match for recreating an Avengers movie, or the Dark Knight or something like that. It's harder, and I think I've cracked it, and we'll find out. There's only one way to know, right?
Well, yeah, trot the game out and see how it plays. So Mega Heroes,
all one word. Yeah.
Mega Heroes. I want to start watching for that in 2024 then.
Or 2025 or 2026 or sometime between now and a dirt nap. Yeah.
I'm going to be the optimist.
I am not going to release anything until I'm satisfied it's thoroughly playtested and I've got it cracked. But and I'm not running it at any upcoming cons, but I have in the past, and I will be eventually again.
All right,
what else besides my little way to pay the bills? I'm also a co-host on the Save for Half podcast with my good friends Liz and Mike Stewart and Corbett Kirkley. Go check that out. And although I'm not at every one of these cons, the Independent Publishers Union, of which I'm a member, will be at TotalCon running games.
Okay.
Sooner than that, at GameholeCon up in Madison, we'll have a whole booth in the dealer area and be running around, running all our games. Those are great guys, and my dear and close friends, Jeff Talanian does Hyperborea with Northwind Adventures, Ian and Rocky Gardner with Silver Belay, Skeeter Green with Skeeter Green Productions, Levi Combs with Planet X Games, and Tom Wilson with Throwaway Games, who does the Basic X. He just had a successful Kickstarter. He's about to deliver on soon.
Yeah, these are all names, well-known names within the hobby here. So this is exciting, and I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And,
well, my pleasure. I tried not to get myself in trouble. I hope I didn't.
Thank you. My wife is she's commenting. So much to quote from. It's a great interview. Great job, babe. You too, Jim. And
you got babed. That's awesome.
She's playing hooky from work. She's supposed to be at work right now. She's clearly watching on her laptop. So this is Tom for Tabletop Tap Room signing out. I want to thank Jim Wampler for coming on and giving a great interview and some great analogies. I love the Doctor Who analogy. And I love the get rid of the guy peeing in the pool.
Well,
there's a T-shirt there, I'm sure.
I'll quote Doctor Who again. If anything I said rang a bell, even a broke clock is right twice a day.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim. And so everybody keep on gaming and check out Mutant Crawl Classics and Scientific Barbarian and Mega Heroes when it comes out. And